Excellent. Welcome, everyone. I'm Corinne Hanson, VP of Sustainability at Greenplaces. Let's give ourselves another minute or so folks can join before we get started. Just want to say we're excited to have everyone join us today. Before we dive in, a few housekeeping items. We're sharing the recording after the webinar. We'll have a live Q&A at the end, so please submit your questions throughout the session. And Christine, I'm going to ask everybody else this icebreaker to post in the chat. But I thought I would just ask you now, is there something that you are excited to celebrate in the next 5 years?
Oh, you changed up the icebreaker on me. Oh my gosh. I am excited to celebrate, the progress that I believe corporations will be making as they, really get into the implementation phase of their climate journeys. Corporations have been focusing a lot on measurement and kind of getting the basics down, but I do think in the next 5 years, there's a lot of opportunity to actually cut emissions.
Excellent, thank you. I'm just keeping you on your toes. I know you can handle it. Good. Now we've got a lot of folks joining. Forgive me, I'm just sorting through so I can make sure I can see everybody in the channel. But please feel free to post your questions if you've got those for us. And welcome everyone. I hope you can tolerate me sort of like looking off the side. I just apologize to Christine. I'm working with double monitors here today. As I said, my name is Corinne Hanson. I'm the VP of Sustainability at Greenplaces. I've been in the sustainability space for about 12 years now. Really focused my efforts mostly on working in the private sector, helping companies and firms integrate ESG into their strategies. And as the VP of Sustainability at Greenplaces, I specifically oversee a team of carbon accountants and support all of our clients with their sustainability strategies, building end-to-end decarbonization strategies, helping them meet their sustainability goals and grow their businesses. So I'm very excited and feel quite honored to be able to introduce our special guest today, Christine Uri, the founder of ESG In-House Counsel. Welcome, Christine. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. Doing really well. Delighted to be able to talk with you and be hosted by Greenplaces.
Thank you so much for being here. We are really honored to have you here today. I'm wondering if you can give a quick intro to our attendees, and thank you for answering our icebreaker already.
Of course. So I'm Christine. I'm a lawyer by background. I practiced law in a firm for about 10 years, and then I started in the sustainability and climate industry in-house at a Fortune 500 energy company. I served as the chief legal officer and the chief sustainability officer. So I had a dual-hatted role there, insight into both worlds with a heavy focus on climate with the work that my company did. And today I have my own company, ESG for In-House Counsel. My focus is on helping in-house legal teams that are getting more and more involved in ESG and sustainability. I want to help make it easier and more understandable for in-house teams, help them build the business case, and then just streamline it so you feel like you can focus on actually making progress as opposed to getting buried too much in reporting and other more administrative obligations.
Thank you so much, Christine. I have to say, you and I were just kind of chatting a little bit before we hopped on here about purpose and need and identity around sustainability being sort of a conversation that anchors us all here. And I think the work that you're doing, in addition to simplifying and making this more accessible, kind of cuts through the fluff a little bit and helps people get into the weeds and really understand what they need to do to be effective. So thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for being here today. As Christine mentioned, I'm gonna go through a couple of slides for us today and sort of do a little level setting, and then get us into more of a fireside chat, ask a few questions, and really let Christine lend her expertise here. So I just want to start by saying sustainability is really becoming a requirement baseline for doing business today. We've been talking about this for a long time. It feels to me about table stakes. Sustainability is a driver of value. And whether or not you acknowledge it is kind of immaterial, right? It is something that is necessary and core to business and always has been. But sustainability isn't just for the Fortune 500. It's not for the set who have enough of a budget to be able to speak to marketing and platforms. It's really a table stakes baseline requirement for all organizations, all sizes of companies within every industry, whether you're fulfilling supplier RFP requirements, government regulations, improving consumer or employee perceptions, or trying to make an impact with what you do every day. And so that is something that we really try to focus on is that the largest companies out there can afford to build out dedicated sustainability teams and expertise, but most businesses cannot. A lot of the time we're working with very small teams who have been voluntold to work on ESG or sustainability, are just getting their arms around it for the first time, and are coming to folks like Christine and myself saying, help, what do I do? How do I get my arms around this? And so we've sort of referenced this in the diagram on the right here. Just, working with a really small team and trying to get out the same kind of comprehensive strategy is impossible. So that's where somebody like Greenplaces comes in. We understand the complexities and challenges that come with navigating RFP requirements, regulations, requests from investors, et cetera. It's why we've developed an all-in-one sustainability platform to streamline your journey toward compliance, leadership, in a new era of transparency. What was previously a nice to have or a way to engage is really required. And so our platform offers streamlined data collection for greenhouse gas emissions, expert insights, marketing tools, and support for key frameworks like CDP, EcoVadis, SBTI, and access to an extensive ESG policy template library. So if you're trying to be compliant with any of those reporting frameworks and you need to get started on building out those policies that underpin your actions, it's a great place to get started. And of course, hands-on guidance from folks like us. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about how businesses start their sustainability journey. Typically involves a few key steps: setting goals, forming a committee, understanding your emissions by calculating your carbon footprint, and finally telling your story. I will just say that these steps are not necessarily in this order. I've worked with a lot of companies that start from a baseline of just measuring their carbon footprint and then work towards setting goals. I've worked with companies who start with a big audacious goal and then try to work backwards, figuring out how to implement. I think increasingly as the requirements around transparency have grown more detailed and more robust, we're seeing a bigger driver toward gathering data, understanding your baseline, and then moving toward expanding out, understanding your emissions, and then setting goals on the back of that. And so at Greenplaces, we've developed a platform and services to really help enable and streamline that process and make sustainability more accessible to all. We recently debuted our new mascot, Littlefoot, who's pictured here on the rock. She'll be guiding us through the next illustration. So just hopefully this is somewhat familiar to all, but I think it's always a great place to start. While regulations, not just here in the US, but globally, are constantly evolving, they typically cover three key areas or three key scopes of carbon emissions, the three scopes of carbon emissions. So first is scope 1, which are direct emissions, anything owned and controlled by a company that is specifically responsible for combusting on site. So shown here on the left. Then we have scope 2, which covers indirect emissions that come from the purchase of electricity, heat, cooling, or steam, anything your company buys. And then finally, scope 3, which I like to say is everything else. All other emissions that happen in your company's supply chain, for example, business travel, tends to be the hairiest to collect and understand and identify. Also, a really wide variety of whether or not you have control over scope 3 emissions. So this is definitely the sort of scary piece. We get a lot of questions around this. I'm sure folks have seen hefty debate around the SEC regulations that have been voluntarily stayed, whether or not they included or didn't include scope 3, and questions and concerns around that. So definitely something we can touch on. And with that, Christine, I'll pass it over to you.
All right. Well, we are seeing a ton of activity in ESG and investors in particular. I keep on talking with investors and researching investors, and there's no doubt that more and more are looking at ESG criteria very seriously. If you're owned by a private equity group, you could well be looking at needing to provide disclosures because the private equity teams are both wanting to ensure that their companies are prepared for any kind of client questions and also any reporting obligations that may come up, or due diligence as you're approaching exit. And the private equity companies also compare and benchmark among themselves. So that gets very important as you're getting up towards that investor phase to do. And it's important to understand, really the history of this. So ESG, to some might feel like a newer term, but the reality is that it came out of an investing environment. It was a term that came out of financial markets because investors recognized that environmental, social, governance, these factors impacted the financial value of their investments and wanted data on it. So it makes sense that you're seeing more investor pressure, and that assets are increasing in this area. So this, thank you. This is something that I work on a lot, is building executive support for ESG. So most of my clients are in-house counsel or general counsel, and usually you'll see kind of coming into companies these client requirements or investor requirements, and it can be in the first place those hit can be general counsel. They can also be, if you're on a sustainability team, I'm guessing we have a lot of sustainability team members here from maybe smaller teams. They probably hit you as well. And the first pain point can be getting that top level buy-in, because ESG and sustainability and climate, they can't be done in a small silo in a company. They require broad support across the company, which requires the support of the executive team. And I had to go through this process on my own as a chief sustainability officer at a company. So I know kind of how to go through this process and build the business case successfully. And these are the kind of 4 key steps that I always recommend. So it starts with meeting one-to-one with each executive. Every executive will have both a different level of understanding on topics like climate, and also a different set of beliefs. And some of the executives will be naturally aligned with wanting to take action. Often this could be your sales executive if they're worried about losing deals. It could be, HR. A lot of HR teams are seeing this come in terms of employee asks as you're recruiting. If you're really lucky, it could be your CFO for various reasons. It's always great to get the CFO on your side, but you need to know, okay, who's kind of coming from what position before you can move forward with an executive team, both in terms of what the fears might be of overspending, or is this really where we want to bring the brand, and the aspirations. What do you think this can do for the business? Is there, I was talking with a major technology company that has significant investment in carbon in particular, and they looked at it as a competitive must. So does it help with your competition? And you need to understand both sides of that before you can kind of get in front of the executive team and make the case. And then there's an educational component. So once you have kind of the picture of where your stakeholders sit, ideally you get some time in front of the executive team, and you need to bring in the market piece. So bring in the information you have in terms of what your clients are asking for, how it's impacting your sales velocity, what level of revenues it's impacting, and then your investor piece. So what kind of questions are you getting, or do you anticipate from investors? How will that impact if you have investment rounds coming up? And then we're talking in this session also about IPOs. There is an expectation in IPOs on due diligence on this subject, and you need to be building that awareness early. So as you're educating your executive team, that I would say is the first, at least third of what you're talking about, so that you can get everybody around the executive table cares about those kind of financial results. So that brings the whole team together. As a lawyer, I always layer in some regulations next, and not from the perspective of pushing compliance, but from the perspective, especially in the US, where most companies, and especially if you're in the mid-market, don't have compliance obligations on this situation on climate or ESG yet. But I bring it in because of the large Europeans and legislation in other countries that really have already baked these requirements into the system. So the function of the regulations, just to bring awareness in a US context, is this is baked, this is done, this isn't a fad, this isn't going away, it's already in law, and it's going to impact particularly if you have European clients or investors. And then, bringing it into a right-sized context. So you speaking their language and realizing, part of the issue may be, a fear that you're going to overspend, overinvest, or things might be kind of overdone. The way that you kind of address that objection is to tie what your actions are in a very streamlined manner. I try to get, companies around three targets, three goals, because if you try to do 10 things, you're going to do nothing, and have them really tied as closely as possible to that company's strategy and to the concerns that you're hearing from those outside stakeholders.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I can't say how many times I've had the conversation in the last 2 years or so with clients or potential clients who are like, wow, I just really feel like we're behind the curve. And my answer is, yeah, that's right. If we're doing nothing right now, then we're behind. And that's okay. Like it's good to recognize and get going, but I think long gone are the days of like, I want to be out in front here. Like if you're not already doing things on this, like you have a bit of catch up to do. And that's, I think, where you and I have kind of stepped in here to try to make this a little bit more accessible. I'm curious, I want to, before we dive into more of a discussion, just want to do a bit of a quick pulse with attendees here. Which sustainability aspect do you think most influences your company's valuation? Is it your carbon footprint reduction, sustainable supply chain, governance practices, or is there another fourth option? And please feel free to select that and then share some answers in the chat. Just give everybody a moment to react to that. Kind of an opinion myself of what tends to be true here, but I can see on my own icon that hosts and panelists cannot participate. Great. Okay. So we have carbon footprint reduction coming in at 27%, sustainable supply chain at 23%, governance practices at 45%, and other at 5%. And I'll pop over the chat and take a look at those. Christine, I'm curious if you think what you think of these results. Does any of this surprise you?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of an even split. Roughly doesn't surprise me too much. I view, for me, governance practices is if you don't have good governance practices, like you don't have the right ethics policies in place, and it's just such a no-go conversation with investors. The thing with governance practices is that most companies, I mean, what those look like have been baked in for so long that the gap to meeting what you need to on governance practices is often, relatively small. I do see that the kind of carbon taking the lion's share of the conversation, and usually it's because the gap there is so much larger in terms of understanding and action than what you see in governance practices. So essentially, if you have poor governance practices, absolutely, that's going to be a major investment problem. But that is a less common scenario than where you have a major gap in terms of carbon. On the supply chain question, that's very industry dependent. So there's industries that have major supply chains, and there's industries where it's just really short. It's not a major risk factor.
Yeah, I think that's right. it's interesting. There used to be a story of the charismatic CEO that would say, we're going to work on this and get it done. And I think that has trended away a little bit, that you really have to see good governance in order to see any of the other pieces fall through. So I think a little bit of a cheaty question. I think they all relate to one another, but very true that folks who are working in the weeds on supply chain are definitely going to be more concerned with that.
Yeah, the CEO, I mean, the kind of broad CEO statements have become, very risky from both a legal and a brand perspective. Your companies were for a long time, honestly, sustainability lived in marketing, and it was like, oh, we're green. And companies in today's environment just can't go out with those broad statements because they'll be picked apart very, very quickly. Even putting aside the regulations that are the anti-greenwashing regulations that are coming up all the time. I just published something on a very broad one from Canada that will impact US companies. The consumers being able to look at these things and pick them apart on social media, it's a major risk.
Definitely. All right, well, I see a few questions coming into the chat here. I'm going to hold them for the end for the time being, but please continue to pop them in. We'll definitely make sure we leave at least 10 minutes or so to walk through live Q&A. So thank you so much for doing that. Keep them coming. But I've just popped us out of the slides here so we can just chat a little bit, Christine. And I want to kick us off by just noting that you've had a really interesting career path. You've served as a chief legal officer and chief sustainability officer. And I'm curious how this dual perspective has really shaped your approach to integrating ESG into corporate strategy, and particularly when it comes to preparing major businesses for their IPOs.
Yeah. It is a unique, background. I hope that it that in the future you see more and more legal and general counsel kind of combining with sustainability and ESG. And this is, I mean, 5 years ago, almost nobody was doing this. Now, I think I've read that 15 to 20% of general counsel have sustainability or ESG kind of under their perimeter. I do think that tends to be more in a mid-market context. But what it's really done for me, when I started out as a chief legal officer, that's my background. And in that background, I did a lot of compliance work, a lot of reporting, ethics, figuring out how to train and integrate ethics across a culture, human rights for sure. So figuring out how to vet vendors and ensure that they were complying with different policies. And then when I walked into the sustainability world, it was a whole new set of words and concepts to learn that at first felt really intimidating. Luckily, I had incredible experts that I could ring up in my last job and ask questions to. But what I was able to do once I mastered the new sets of kind of terminology and concepts, the great thing for legal counsel is that the kind of processes that you would use to integrate something like ethics across a business is the same kind of process that you would use to embed sustainability. So you don't have to, there's a lot you don't have to learn from scratch in terms of establishing your cross-functional team, your leadership goal, your targets, your risk management. So general counsel are well positioned to do that. And you also have the relationships, because I don't think a lot of people realize this, but your in-house legal team touches every aspect of the business. So you can be kind of sneaky in your relationships and building those coalitions. I mean, in terms of IPOs or preparing for transactions, how this impacted me is I really learned the timelines when I was setting this up myself, and how important it is to start early. So, I think if you wait until you are getting to sustainability due diligence, that could be 3 months before your IPO. And if you haven't done any work by then, you're not going to change your situation. So you have to, I would put it on that checklist at least 24 months in advance, so that you can get a gap assessment to figure out, okay, what do we have in place? What do we really need to do? do your measurements, collect your data, educate your executive team. It's one of the really crucial things to realize is that your executive team on a roadshow or as they're talking to investors will have to answer questions on this. And you can tell yourself, and I've definitely heard this, like, oh, we have a really small carbon footprint, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, you haven't measured it. Your executives don't know how to talk about it. That's not going to be a good answer on a roadshow or to investors. Maybe it is really small, but if you have measured it, you can talk about how it's small. You can talk about what you're doing to reduce it and look like you've managed your risk. Then, you're way far ahead of the game in terms of assuring investors, capturing that value premium, especially if you're, looking for investment abroad. So kind of bringing together the two ends of realizing what kind of time frame it takes to get these programs in place, how you do it, and then in what kind of runway you need to take those actions before a major transaction.
Like 100%. I think I wonder how many folks listening in today too, and if you've had this experience as well of sort of the flip side of things, the ambitious CEOs who, if you've been the head of sustainability at a company as we have, we'll say something in said questions or responses to inquiries where you're like, okay, now we have to do that. We were previously not doing that. We will make that happen now.
Yeah.
It's public, and that scramble is also not fun. So I think in IPOs and exits, of course, you're selling yourselves. You're selling the company, and you're making sure that you want to make those claims are reputable and adequately ambitious, represent your ability to create value. But getting caught out is definitely not what we're looking for. I want to ask you about something that we've talked about previously of whether or not this concept of ESG will just go away. We get this question a lot in this space of just, is this a fad? Is this something I need to really prepare for? And there's been a lot of pushback and regulatory uncertainties, like what's happening with the SEC climate disclosure. What's your response to that? And how would you advise companies who, and especially heads of sustainability who are getting that pushback as well, saying, is this just going to go away? It's a really evolving landscape. What are we supposed to do?
This is a US question. Like the US is the only place that this question's being asked. And I think that it's easy to see why that is. Because if you look at the media headlines, the headlines are all about the anti-ESG movement. And then you also have, the SEC putting a stop on its regulation was not super helpful to this entire discussion. The reality is that almost none of the anti-ESG regulations pass. Their impact is minimal. They have way more headlines than you have actual passed legislation. And by the time the SEC delayed so long in releasing anything that from a regulatory perspective, it is maybe it'll add some teeth, but it's not super relevant. The reason is that you have other regulations on a global basis. So the European disclosure regulations apply to 50,000 companies, including 10,000 globally and 3,000 in the US. And you can bet that these are, your larger companies, your more sophisticated companies, and the regulations require that you drive down certain measures throughout your supply chain. Already completely baked in. We saw, I've seen in the course of my, career, just in the last, I'd say 12, 14 years, this have two different waves that I think are very instructive for how this will go down. So first you had information security. When I started, even in 2013, you could put something in a contract that was like, we'll follow best information security practices. And that was it. Now, you really have to have an ISO certification. It is built in. It has to happen. And then even closer to the mark, privacy. So 2015 in the US, the Europeans knew that GDPR was coming in 2018. They're starting to prepare. In the US, we're all like, oh, that's a European problem. We're not gonna look at it. But GDPR, it's too difficult to have multiple. If you're a global company, it's too difficult to have multiple standards across the entire company. So you end up gravitating to the most conservative standard, which is what we saw with privacy. And now even if you're a startup I talked with this to the Greenplaces team about this. If you're a startup, you still have to have those certifications that show that you are managing privacy risks to that level because it's become a market expectation. So let's put aside the SEC, the anti-ESG, all of that kind of stuff, which is causing executives to be like, oh, is the Supreme Court going to fix this? But the reality is that investors expect it. It's baked into regulations abroad, and large, U.S. companies and then seeping into mid-U.S. companies aren't going to be able to. It's not just going to disappear. It's out there, and it's going to be a continuing expectation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And when you think about building buy-in for leadership, that this is a question that sometimes you get in pushback of, do I really need to be serious about this? What would you recommend? What are some strategies that you found most effective in terms of gaining and galvanizing support from leadership around sustainability, if it's maybe not the top priority or not core to brand, purpose, mission, external marketing, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, in a B2B context, is where I think you have an opportunity that's not always captured. And what you have to do is go dig into the RFPs you're receiving and the contracts you're receiving, put some quantification to it so that you can surface up, okay, how often are these questions coming up, and pull out a couple marquee clients or prospects where this was a serious issue that came up, or you had to go back and forth with the compliance team. It doesn't, I mean, it shouldn't take too many of those for a company to take action, because getting started with doing some basics, figuring out what your answers are to these RFPs, getting a carbon footprint, getting some education around how to talk about these issues. We're not talking millions of dollars to get that kind of thing done. Certainly, I mean, if you're on here and you have a giant global supply chain and you need to, replace equipment, that's a different ball game. And there's a ton of different considerations in that. But if you're just trying to get your first reporting out, figure out what your carbon footprint is, start reducing it, bringing in the client expectations, and then if you are coming up to a major transaction, getting some benchmarking about how you're going to be judged across with your peers and with your competitors in this area, and digging up some of the research. If you want to send me a DM, I track this research all the time in terms of how ESG factors are impacting valuations in these kind of transactions. I know Deloitte just came out with a big major study on it. The large consultancies are always putting something out.
That's great. Maybe we can dig into that a little bit more, because I'm curious about, you mentioned prepping for a big transaction. When companies are prepping for an IPO or exit, what are some of the actions that you would say are most critical to sustainability? What sustainability actions are most critical to them driving the highest valuation? I think that's the biggest question on folks' minds, is just what can they do to appear most valuable? And maybe as a part two to this, are investors from different countries taking different views on greenhouse gas emissions, for example, US versus EU?
Yeah. So I think it starts with showing that you have good governance over this issue. Put an executive in charge of it so that you have that point person, be able to show that your executive team has looked at it, has some kind of reporting, looks at ESG across the spectrum on a regular basis, so that the important thing there, putting in a risk management context, and that shows that your company, it's not just your ESG risk, but has a framework for evaluating risk in general, and is taking that risk approach, because from an investor's perspective, that's critical to the long-term success of the business. So starting with that governance, getting your data in hand, and certainly carbon data is a critical piece of that. I would also say DEI data. I know we had I think Ron threw in a question about that. For a lot of industries, the human rights, or not human rights, sorry, human capital. Yeah, human rights also important, but human capital data in terms of your diversity and what you're doing in those programs is critical. I would take a look at SASB, and SASB has a great materiality matrix for different industries. And so depending on your industry, they do a really nice job of identifying what are going to be the most critical factors for you. So you can also take a look at those, and they can provide good guidance for what you need to put together. You may want to engage earlier with a benchmarking platform like a Sustainalytics or an EcoVadis or something like that, so that you get some kind of benchmarking. And I look for the kind of quick wins that you already have. So I put quick wins into two categories. One is there will inevitably be things in your company that are great for ESG that you don't even know about, because these things happen in a siloed effort. So maybe your IT department has taken it upon themselves to, find a responsible use for all of your hardware, or, maybe your data service provider actually has, gone through and significantly reduced their scope 2 emissions, so that you have a better provider there. There are different avenues, but figure out what you're already doing. And then the easy things to close. So the policies, one of the things I love about Greenplaces is that policy library. When I first saw, I'm a lawyer. When I first saw the platform, I'm like, wait a minute, you have policies? That's great. And maybe other clients don't get as excited about the policy library as I do. But for me, policies, that's an easy gap closer. So, if you're getting hit for not having a forced labor policy, like, fix that. If you're a US company that's looking at going public, and you don't have an extended supply chain. So if you're not, if you're a major global, supply chain, and you have, a manufacturing in multiple countries, for sure, dealing with forced labor can be very, very complicated. If you are a US-based SaaS company, you probably already have, this well under control. So let's get those kind of policies, and that's just an example, in place, so that you're not getting hung up on the little stuff.
It's so right. We do get a lot of good feedback on that policy library. It's more popular than I would have expected, and it's right. It's true. In that slide I shared earlier about setting goals and understanding your baseline, I think one of the earliest things that you can do is set a policy. If you want there to be something that your employees can react to in order for them to uphold any kind of standard, then you need to set forth what you mean by that, and that's where it becomes more than a piece of paper. And of course, that's going to be important to somebody who's legally minded. And on that point, legal teams are increasingly becoming more responsible for covering ESG actions and disclosures. So how can in-house counsel effectively lead or contribute to sustainability initiatives, especially when resources are limited and focuses potentially elsewhere?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And in-house legal teams, get involved in this, in ESG, in two different ways. There, in some cases, ESG will be led out of a different area. Maybe you're fortunate enough to have a sustainability person. Maybe it's in finance. Maybe it's in strategy. Hopefully it's not in marketing. That's the one red flag that I always pull out, but today, just because even if your marketing department's doing a really good job with it, the optics of that, with all the greenwashing, litigation and regulations coming out, aren't great. But if it's sitting somewhere else, then legal is an important player at the table that needs to be watching regulations. And there's a lot of different newsletters and information pieces you can follow. I know Greenplaces does put out content. I put out content all the time, trying to follow major regulations. And then there's places like Green Digest puts out a lot of great content that you can use just to keep up to date on what's happening. So you're carrying that regulatory flag. Really, you have to, the one thing and that legal teams, I think, need to get their head around more, that where there's a gap is this climate knowledge and understanding, what scope 1, 2, and 3 mean, understanding what going and looking at the what your company's already saying about these topics, looking at trying to see whether that's accurate. Is it defensible? Has it been tested, or is it, if it's just fluffy, you need to start pulling it off your website and carry that banner. Then, yeah, every legal team has to do those things. And if you are, a legal team that's really taking leadership on this, it is another task to do. You have to go in and get that executive support across across the channels. You will not be able to make progress just leveraging, even if you had, let's say you had the biggest legal team budget ever, you're not going to be able to make progress on ESG with just the legal team. It really requires a full company effort. So you have to go in and do that executive business case building that we talked about at the beginning, because even just to get the internal resources and participation, you're going to need, putting aside budget, you're going to have that full executive support. So it starts with that layer. And going in, and then it is really being that leader on a cross-functional basis that's driving against the goals that have been set.
Excellent. You touched on this a little bit in that last response, but we've talked about what companies can do to prepare and how to increase valuation. I'm curious if you can talk us through some of the foibles when a company is preparing for an IPO. What are some unanticipated challenges that companies are making around ESG and sustainability?
Yeah, overstating. So you want to be able to respond to due diligence, but it will be more destructive than not if you try to put out, we're net zero kind of statement without being able to back it up. That's going to shoot you in the foot because it'll cost you credibility. It's much better to be honest about where you are at than to state something that sounds really ambitious, but that you can't back up. And that would be true. I talk about climate a lot because I come from climate, but it's also true on diversity issues. If you are just putting out a statement, we're committed to diversity, but you don't have any kind of backup and to show that you're doing anything, that is dangerous territory to get into. So being honest with where you're at. And the other thing that I think is really important for companies to understand as they're coming up to this point is the investors aren't looking, the standard isn't you have to be, a rock star. It's not, the standard isn't you have to be in the top 5% of performers or leading the pack. The standard is, are you running a responsible business? And so the getting to that threshold, which is somewhere that all businesses should be managing their risks. Let's be realistic about it and be truthful.
That's so true. Some of these things can seem obvious, but it's very easy to perceive sustainability as an opportunity to be opportunistic and ambitious and forward-looking, and maybe worry a little bit less about backing it up traditionally. And I think that's where we've seen a lot of regulations come to fruition, is to come counter to that. Regulation in the UK around greenwashing specifically really taking off and expected to be seen here. I want to turn to really the actions that folks can take. And so for any of the attendees here that are wanting to really get involved and take action after this webinar, what are the first 3 steps they should take to start embedding sustainability into their company's strategy and operations?
Yeah, read what's on your website. So see what's already there. You might be surprised. Then really that's both serious and a joke in terms of the 3 actions. It starts with educating yourself. So go out and just do a broad set of reading on ESG. You can go through. I publish for beginners usually. I mean, what my target is to publish stuff where if you're just getting into sustainability as a professional from somewhere else, that makes it approachable. So you can go check out my newsletter, check out some of the posts I've done, just because I just say that there's a lot of people who do it really well. I'm not the only one, but just because I target that really beginner level. And then certainly, your larger consultancies will have much more detailed information, but you do have to spend some time educating yourself, then, bringing it to your team. So bring back to create that awareness across the company and the business case. Really, you have to, I can't stress enough, you have to tie it into the financial outcomes in order to get it off the board. I wish everybody would be like, no, we really do have to cut emissions globally 50% by 2030 in order to avoid catastrophes. So let's get on this. That would be a wish in my heart. But from a business perspective, I've been in it long enough to know that you have to have more than that. So you do have to tie it to the numbers. Luckily, they're there based on where the market is heading.
Yeah, I think it's easier than ever to show the ROI of sustainability initiatives if you only look. Obviously, we've built in a lot of work like that into our tools. It's always been a massive focus for me working with clients, but I think one piece of advice I would offer is just to start from that perspective as well, is pick one case that you know is going to resonate. You know your team, you know your leadership, you know what they care about, and if not, then you should learn.
Yeah.
And so you can make the case for what needs to be attended to by drawing on those examples and then showing the actual ROI, the value creation from working on a sustainability initiative in that space.
And there are different ways. I mean, definitely bringing it into your own clients and your own experience is really, really important. Benchmarking against your competitors is very helpful. The pulling, there's your case, there's your competitor's case, there's data that you can pull. And if you just want the data, like I said, DM me and I can send you some studies that show like, okay, this, the investors are pulling out of deals where the ESG performance is low, and investors are valuing deals this much more for good ESG performance. So there's kind of quantitative data like that out there. And then there's the disaster cases where you have significant brand harm from things being mismanaged. And I would look at it in terms of importance in that order when you're talking to executives. So the real on the ground, what's happening in your business, what your competitors are doing, your statistical data, and then the catastrophes out there is kind of what I would find the most effective in ordering in an argument.
I do hope folks take Christine up on that and send her a DM. Her research is fantastic and definitely helpful if you're trying to make that case, whatever stage. Uh, Thank you so much for letting me pepper you with questions, Christine. I appreciate it, and I hope that's been helpful for the audience. We do definitely have a bunch of questions that have come in, so I want to take these next couple of minutes and turn to those. We've touched on themes of this, but I think there's always more meat to dig into here. So Corey Marshall, thank you for your question. It seems that a lot of this is focused on compliance and limiting downside risk. How does value creation or revenue opportunity fit into this conversation?
Yeah. This is great. And it actually, I was reading Brian's question as well, also talking about value creation as an aspect. So I do think the value creation gets underplayed, and that it probably gets a little bit more underplayed from when you're coming at it from a legal or a regulatory perspective. Where I think that comes in is, looking at that benchmarking and the competitive aspects. So to what extent for all business is this going to become, and I agree with what you said at the top of the hour, that we're kind of past competitive differentiator land now. We're talking about table stakes. So at what point is this going to become a drag on your business if you don't move forward? You could look at that as value creation. It's at least maintaining value. And then in terms of whether you can come up with new products or new client approaches on it. That's very business dependent and industry dependent. I do think it's a question that every business should be asking. You know, we have a massive energy transition coming up. Are there opportunities? There are huge amounts of dollars coming out with respect to the kind of misnamed, what was it? Oh, I'm blanking here because it was so off, the Inflation Reduction Act. But it is a massive amount of dollars being pushed into things like renewables and different environmental measures. So are there opportunities like that based on your business model and your industry you could take advantage of? Or is there, new market sector? So the sustainability and ESG, this is just an expanding market, and it's looking at what you're doing now to see, is there a different product innovation? Are there government, funds that you can tap into for different projects that you're heading? Is there a different client segment that if you move forward with these plans, you'll be able to access? So doing some brainstorming around that is very helpful. To do that, you do need to get kind of a cross section of folks from your business in a room. And to Brian, our CFO's entertaining the value creation aspect. I think you would have to, for most CFOs, I have to say I worked with a CFO that was all over this. So it really depends on the nature of the CFO. But I think you have to bring it to them, most of them, with like, okay, here's the idea, here are the numbers we think it will attach to it, here's the cost, and to get them, the data that most CFOs need to start clicking around on it. But you do have very innovative CFOs. It is coming up in CFO publications. If there are any CFOs on the call and you want to throw in a chat, I would love to see it. You can, even if it's a chat telling me I'm wrong, that's fine. But I'd love to hear from you on it as well.
Yeah, and I think the CFOs are all over it, and CFOs are asking for quantification, right? Like,
Yeah, always.
show me the case here, but show me how this is going to be used. Show me the play in the market. Many years ago, I helped write a book with Mark Lee, who was the former CEO of sustainability consulting firm that I used to work for, and Chris Coulter of GlobeScan, does a lot of research in the sustainability space, called All-in-One Sustainability, that really just was a series of case studies of clients that we and they had worked with over many, many years about exactly this, creating value in the marketplace. Everyone from interface, creating the tiled carpet platform, carpet tiles, sustainable recycled carpet tiles, like an early case of circular economy that has been touted for years and years, pretty much in every single airport that you walk through, like mass application and use, super durable, really cost effective, huge profit margins for them. And I also think of like Philips and their lighting as a service offering like early examples. Now you see sustainability really mentioned everywhere. And the reason is that sustainability is not hurting business, right? Like it's a driver of value. So if you're talking about your valuation and creating value, then it's an important piece of the puzzle. And sorry, we just have a few more questions, Christine. Maybe while I'm coughing, you can take the next.
Yep, I was just reading through them. So we did touch, Ron asked about ESG efforts impacting human capital and internal resources on companies. Are there internal skill gaps to ready a company? There's a couple pieces, the human capital, that is for a lot of investors a key measure. And a lot of investors have kind of switched the framework that in language that they're talking about from a DEI perspective to put it under the umbrella of human capital. You see this particularly in industries where there is, a lot of talent competition, because all of the data out there shows where you have high talent competition. You get a lot of questions and pressure around corporate purpose and around showing that you're a responsible company. Is there a skill gap? Absolutely. There is a skill gap within companies, and it's hard for the mid-market because it's not like you're going to, this kind of goes to what the intro presentation, you're not going to go hire a full-time GHG accountant until you get to a really significant size. So there is that talent gap. You do have to, when you start, rely on some external expertise to do that efficiently. So you're not adding headcount, but you're bridging that talent gap. In some things, your internal teams will be able to learn from the external experts, and then in some cases, it's a matter of relying on the external experts until you get to a size where it makes sense to do those internal hires. So there's absolutely a talent gap within companies, and it can be hard talent to come by, that you need to get creative on in terms of leveraging a combination of training and outside expertise to get over that hump. The election, a good subject. Yes, I do think that people are, the election is playing in to some of the hesitancy that you're seeing in the US around ESG right now. I find it kind of puzzling. It was interesting what I observed from being in the industry in 2016 when Trump won the race and pulled out of the Paris Accord. I've never seen anything more motivational for businesses to attack climate. I mean, like it was, we came out with this big, we're still in, businesses did not like that at all, at least your larger businesses. And so you actually, my opinion, and certainly Corinne, you can weigh in here, but I saw a huge surge in commitment after that. So I, you know, I don't, the people are waiting on the election for all kinds of things, but I don't think you can predict the future of ESG based on this election, given what we've seen in the past and how there can, and now we're in a Democrat administration with this huge anti-ESG movement. It could well be the opposite. The other thing that you have to be watching is the international elections, and there's been a couple, with the EU elections in general, the new EU representatives are expected to be less proactive in terms of environmental legislation. To some extent, that's kind of, it doesn't matter a lot because it's already enacted, so it's already in place and it's already moving forward. But if measures, to the extent measures haven't passed in Europe, it could go slower, or you could see them watered down. On the flip side, UK elections just concluded, and the Labour Party kind of took the majority, and they're moving forward with the green agenda. So you'll see elections all over the place, kind of impacting on these subjects.
Yeah, I think one thing to note too is that the election obviously is playing a role. I would absolutely agree with that. I do recall so vividly in 2016 seeing this tumult of activity backlash from companies saying absolutely not. We've put so much energy toward this. This is what has to happen. Companies like Shell and Chevron publicly calling for action on climate so that they could play in a equalized marketplace. Still not seeing enough of that having come to fruition. Members of Shell's ERC still calling for that. It's kind of an insane circumstance of companies asking to be regulated, and still not being able to deliver because of other political agendas. It's really kind of a fascinating thing. And I think what I have to say to that is that the climate is moving at a pace irrelevant to our lack of action. That we have yet again the hottest year on record. Global warming is going to displace people. It is going to displace businesses, supply chains that at minimum we need to be insulating ourselves from. So if you are solely concerned with whether or not you need to disclose, you're kind of missing the picture. That's why I say things like, action needed now. The case to be made for protecting your company and protecting your value is the same for taking action on climate. And so at minimum, you need to be accounting for where your ducks all sit now so that you can learn how to protect and insulate them from what's to be expected here. And then, of course, we will see regulation tick up because we're about to enter a really intense period of change and tumult in the global landscape. And so that's why I think we're signaling an urgency around it. We're talking about this as table stakes, but I think it's always good to kind of keep that global perspective in the background. It's very easy for us to get locked into our day-to-day and think about what we have to accomplish and to lose sight of. And sometimes that's really what the election is intended to distract from, right? It's chaos for distraction's sake. It's kind of to your point about the SEC, like let it be. It doesn't really matter. We need to focus on the business objectives at hand. And what I think we're going to see is maybe not a big unification of standards, but at least in a real alignment of incentives that everyone is going to have to be on the same page about.
Yeah, I think, having sat on an executive team for a long time, I know that you have to make these financial arguments and that businesses are about financials and that it's critical to do this. And I help companies, make that business case. But as individuals, we all have to, go home at the end of the day and look ourselves in the mirror and ask what kind of world we're creating. And so, at some point, ticking and tying the numbers, to your point, like the Earth's atmosphere doesn't care whether you can tick and tie your valuation numbers, and so we have to also bring that kind of human perspective into what we do every day.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, thank you so much, Christine, for sitting down with us. I'm aware we're at time, but it's been such a fantastic conversation with you. I'm excited to do this again in the future. Yes, this recording will be shared with folks, so we'll make sure we get that out to you. But thank you all. Feel free to reach out with questions. Definitely DM Christine for research. And thank you all so much for joining us today. I'd love to see you again.